may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, guys, very exciting news. We have an official date and time for the Flock Austin meetup that we teased a few weeks ago. It is going to be June 19th at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, which is obviously just Austin time. But I really hope that y'all can make it out. I'd imagine it's going to be probably pretty small, anywhere from 5 to 10 people. And we do not have an actual location for it set. Obviously, I live in an apartment complex downtown, so it's not like we can all come to my place. But we are going to be definitely trying to find some kind of outdoor bar that preferably has patio tables where we can have a decently sized group. I'd imagine it's not going to be that large of a group, but like I said, I mean, the more the merrier. So if you have any suggestions on where you would like it to be, please shoot me a quick DM over there on Patreon. Let me know where you would want the meetup to be. That way I can throw that on an official poster and get that out ASAP. I have a few ideas, but the majority of the ideas that I've had are downtown, where I think it would be very difficult for people to park their cars. So I think we should probably avoid that. I don't want people having to get Ubers and stuff. So yeah, let's just continue to look for a place to host the meetup. Worst case scenario, we can go to like Zilker Park or something. But yeah, let me know if y'all have any ideas over there on Patreon. Now, that's it. Let's continue what we have been doing and looking at running backs that are going near each other in drafts. We're going to be going down the draft board just slightly. We're going to be going into the 4th round range or into the 3rd, however you want to look at it. And we are going to be talking about Travis Etienne and David Montgomery. Now, I will be completely honest. Y'all know that I have strong opinions on both of these running backs. I mean, I am sitting on just two ends of the spectrum with either player. So y'all probably already know who I think the better value is, but I'm excited to go through and break down these running backs in depth. But please, if you have not already, for whatever reason, make sure you go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton. We just passed 23,000 subscribers on this channel. We passed 5,000 subscribers on our Dynasty Fantasy Football channel. We passed over 320 people supporting the show on Patreon. So yeah, I mean, the community continues to grow every single day, and that's because of all your support, and thank you so much, guys. But anyway, let's dive into my favorite running back out of the two. It's not going to be a surprise to anybody, Travis Etienne. And here with Travis Etienne, I mean, when we are looking at these rookie running backs, I am tired of sounding like a broken record. I am tired of saying the same things over and over and over again. And y'all are going to read why these boxes are so crucial in our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide coming out. But what we are looking for these rookie players is we need the running backs to check 4 boxes. We need the running backs to check the boxes of NFL draft capital, which will lead to opportunity, which will lead to touches at the next level. We need to see the speed, the athleticism for them to have that breakaway run potential. We need to see the BMI for them to have the frame to be able to handle usage on all 3 downs. And we need to see the college production in the receiving game, which should indicate that they can play on 3rd downs and they can play in obvious passing down situations at the next level. Now, if we go through and we look at the thresholds that we need to be establishing for each one of these boxes, I obviously go into way more depth in the Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide coming out, but regardless, I mean, the thresholds are going to be a 40-yard dash time of 4.60, a BMI of 30.0, and an 8.5% team target share at the college level. And you go through with Travis Etienne, you see that he checks every single one of these boxes. Not only does he get the 1st round NFL draft capital, which is probably the most important thing for a rookie running back coming into the NFL when you're trying to establish what their production is going to be right away, given the fact that touches are everything at the running back position. But beyond that, he actually has a BMI of 30.8, which puts him in a class where he can be a 3-down running back. Obviously, we always knew Travis Etienne was going to have elite speed based on him being a former track star and what we saw at Clemson with his own breakaway run rate. But regardless, he runs a 4.45 at his pro day, so no need to worry about that. And the college target shares through the roof. The most exciting thing about Travis Etienne is the fact that he was able to have 12.2% of his team targets at Clemson. If you look at these boxes being checked, if you look at running backs that were drafted in the 1st round that meet the thresholds with their BMI, with their speed, with their college target share, and getting drafted in the first round, I mean, you have a great list of players. So if we go through and we look at every running back that was drafted in the first round over the past 8 years, you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Rashad Penny, Sony Michel, Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, Trent Richardson, Doug Martin, and David Wilson. Now, if you go through and kind of filter this list down to the players that check all of the boxes that Travis Etienne does, all the boxes that matter in predicting fantasy success at the next level, I mean, you get down to 9 players. You have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Saquon Barkley, Rashad Penny, Leonard Fournette, CMC, Ezekiel Elliott, Todd Gurley, Trent Richardson, and Doug Martin. Now, within those 9 running backs, let's not focus on how their careers went throughout the duration of it, because we know that we are talking 2021 fantasy football here. We're not talking dynasty. But if we really get down to the details and you really dive into what they did their rookie seasons, I mean, all of these running backs were fantastic. You can make the argument that these running backs were elite, in that 8 out of these 9 players were actually able to finish as top 24 running backs in points per game their rookie season. Then you go through, and if you're trying to identify the players that really were contributing to your starting lineup, the players that were high in running back 2s, low in running back 1s, I mean, guys that were in the top 15, you have 7 out of the 9 there. So an incredible mark. Literally the only 2 players that did not hit that mark were Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Rashad Penny. And then if you're going, okay, who are the league winners? Who are the guys that were the top 10 running backs in points per game? Because we understand that's how you actually win your fantasy league. How you win your fantasy league is by identifying those rookie running backs going later on in drafts that have the potential to be in the top 10. Guys like James Robinson, and obviously a player like James Robinson who's undrafted, a guy that doesn't really fit this mold at all. I mean, he's going to be almost impossible to identify. But if you stick to those boxes and making sure that every single one is checked coming into the NFL, it is extremely easy to identify those running backs that are going to have that top 10 potential. And that if you go through and look at the guys that checked all the same boxes that Travis Etienne did, I mean, there were only 9 of those players and 6 of them finished in the top 10 running backs in points per game in their rookie season. So obviously, Travis Etienne is in fantastic company here. Yet you find out that his ADP is actually with the 39th pick. So you're getting Travis Etienne at the beginning of the 4th round. Sometimes he's slipping into the mid to late 4th round. And you're going, okay, historically, this profile tells us that he's a top 10 running back right away. Why are you getting a top 10 running back in the 4th round? Something doesn't add up here. And everything about Travis Etienne and everything about this ADP is just about the narrative that we have circulating him and Jacksonville in itself. Obviously, you have heard the coach come out in Urban Meyer saying, hey, Travis Etienne is going to be strictly our 3rd down running back. Hey, we are trying Travis Etienne out at wide receiver, really seeing what he can do catching the ball. And yes, we already identified the fact that Travis Etienne is that elite pass catching running back based on his college target share and based on him coming away with 48 receptions in his final season. But guys, this is what you always want to do in fantasy. What you always want to do is you want to use that coach speak, the stuff that people are really focusing in on, the stuff that really doesn't matter a lot. I mean, just think about last training camp where all you heard was, hey, Bryan Edwards, the best wide receiver in football. Hey, Bryan Edwards, the Raiders got the steal in the draft. This is going to be the best player since Jerry Rice. I mean, those were the reports coming out of training camp. And you know, a rookie wide receiver that had no positive buzz, the rookie wide receiver that really fell with his ADP just because we had nothing coming out of camp, was Justin Jefferson. And what this shows us is that coach speak and just buzz around a certain player really does not mean much at all if you're talking about the guys that had the profile coming into the NFL, the guys that got the team investment, as we already know what to expect. We already have a large track record of these players that get that significant team investment, and the teams themselves show us what they think of a player and what they are planning to do with them based on the investment that they make. Now, I will say that if you're talking about coach speak, you definitely need to be paying attention once we get closer to the season with those players that are going later in the NFL draft, those guys that we don't know if they're going to make a roster, we don't know if they're going to be the running back 2 on the depth chart, or we don't know if they're going to be the running back 4. There, you need to make sure you're listening to reports at training camp. There, you need to make sure you're listening to what the coaches are saying. But with these players that get drafted in the first round, the team has already showed us what they thought about them. You know how many running backs in the past 10 years have been drafted in the first round that have this Travis Etienne profile and their team only utilizes them as a third down running back? Literally none. It just simply doesn't happen. And I know a lot of people are going to want to come out and say, but Mason, James Robinson is the best running back we have ever seen playing alongside a rookie first-year player. And while, yes, James Robinson is a good running back, James Robinson is going to go down in history as one of the best undrafted free agent rookie running backs of all time, based on the volume that he received in Jacksonville, based on the fantasy production that he had. But simply, fantasy owners have a very bad job of understanding what we saw with James Robinson with his real life value versus his fantasy value. Because if you're looking at James Robinson, I understand that it was a very bad situation in Jacksonville, but he did finish 26th in the NFL in yards per carry, and yards per carry isn't close to a perfect metric. I mean, so much noise is built into that metric based on the offensive line play, based on the overall game script that you were seeing from these teams. So I don't want to be sitting here and go, hey, J.K. Dobbins is the best running back in the NFL because he had the highest yards per carry. No, that's not how it works. Obviously, so much more goes into it, but it is noteworthy just to point out that small mark of efficiency, and it's also noteworthy to see that the Jacksonville Jaguars finished in the bottom 5 of the NFL in rushing yards per game. So yes, James Robinson was an elite fantasy asset based on the fact that the other running backs in the backfield were a guy like Raquel Armstead. Well, that's actually the player that I bet on, but clearly he had no talent whatsoever dealing with all the COVID issues. I mean, he just was never able to get going. And he also was playing alongside Divine Oxigbo. So, I mean, James Robinson was fantastic in 2020, but it was more so based on the fact that there were no other running backs in the backfield to take any touches away from him, and James Robinson was an above-average NFL running back in his own right, so whenever he met that large workload, then he was able to come out and be an elite fantasy asset, but he himself is nothing close to one of the best running backs in the NFL. So please don't be using that as a justification on why you're going to have Travis Etienne purely as a three-down running back. I'm sorry, a third-down running back. He is going to be a three-down guy, but people want to peg him in as a third-down player this year, and you actually see this with ESPN current projections. I mean, it's hilarious to see ESPN projecting Travis Etienne for, keep in mind, a 17-game season. They're projecting this over a 17-game year. They're projecting him to have 137 carries for 616 rushing yards, 59 receptions for 463 rushing yards. Now, simply, this is a horrible projection. I'm going to come out and say this right away. There is no way that Travis Etienne, without injury, does not hit 137 carries. I would bet every penny of my name on that bet. I mean, I promise you, you look historically what you were seeing with Travis Etienne, this is a horrible projection. So many people are over projecting the type of workload that James Robinson is going to have. We saw what the Jacksonville Jaguars actually think about James Robinson. We saw what Urban Meyer actually thinks about James Robinson compared to Travis Etienne, because if they wanted James Robinson to be carrying the ball 200 times this upcoming season, they would not have spent a first-round pick on Travis Etienne. If they really just wanted a third down running back and they wanted James Robinson to remain the starter, what they would have done is they would have waited until the 4th round and they would have drafted Michael Carter Jr. So please ignore the coach speak. Please ignore the narrative. Focus in on what actually matters, and that's the metrics with context that we've been looking at for years now, and we've had great success identifying those running backs that are going to come in and produce right away. So Travis Etienne, you have to love him if you're getting him in the 4th round. I think it doesn't matter if it's a redraft league. It doesn't matter if you were just playing in 2021. It doesn't matter if you took 3 running backs with your first 3 picks. If I am on the board, if I am on the clock in the 4th round and Travis Etienne is on the board, I mean, that is going to be my draft pick. I can't even wait until the end to say it. That is just a fantastic value. Now, going over to David Montgomery. David Montgomery has had one of the most wild rides in his NFL career. Now, y'all know that with David Montgomery, if you're following the Dynasty channel for a while now, I mean, in that 2019 draft class, I hated David Montgomery. I mean, I was all aboard pushing David Montgomery down our rookie draft board, going, you know what? He doesn't check a few of these boxes. You know what? Compared to a player like Miles Sanders is significantly better. And while I was taking victory laps on that last offseason, it looks like now maybe they're a little bit closer than we need to admit. But regardless, David Montgomery just completely drops the ball through the first half of his NFL career. And then in the second half of 2020, David Montgomery is an elite fantasy running back. Very similar to a James Robinson. He is touching every single ball in that backfield, and consistently he is bringing home a ton of fantasy value. Now, projecting him going forward, it's not going to be as simple as looking at what happened last year, because we need to understand the context in which it happened in, and we need to understand the context where this offense is going. And this offense, most likely getting significantly better. I mean, going from Mitchell Trubisky to almost any other NFL quarterback is going to be an upgrade, let alone the fact that they go out of their way and they trade for Justin Fields. Now, y'all know I'm of the opinion that Justin Fields is currently a little overvalued. I mean, Trey Lance is a much better quarterback in fantasy, but regardless, even though the dynasty community is a little bit too high on Justin Fields, if we are talking what's going to happen with the Chicago Bears offense in 2021, I mean, Justin Fields is going to be fantastic for him. He's going to have them with an elite ceiling based on what we saw at Ohio State. Now, with David Montgomery, this is good news in that you always want your player playing on a better offense, given the fact that they are going to have longer sustained drives, given the fact that they are going to be able to have more trips to the red zone. So Justin Fields coming in should definitely help David Montgomery. But the problem with David Montgomery is the fact that Tariq Cohen is going to limit Montgomery to really having no shot at being that workhorse running back while Cohen is healthy. And if we break into the exact numbers with what we saw in 2020 and 2019, I mean, it is clear that the reason David Montgomery had that quote-unquote breakout where he was just seeing a ton of volume at the end of last year is because that Tariq Cohen injury that occurred during week 3. Now, if we go through and we look at David Montgomery with Tariq Cohen on the team, I mean, he's decent. He's definitely someone that should be drafted within the first 4 rounds, but the problem is he just doesn't have access to that elite upside. And that if you're looking at his 2020 statistics with Tariq Cohen, I mean, there he averaged 12.5 points per game. He averaged 14 carries a game, 3 targets, 86 total yards, and he finished as the running back 26 in points per game. Now, I know it's hard to look at that one small sample that we have in 2020 with Tariq Cohen and go, hey, this is how the usage is going to be between the 2 running backs. But you go through, and in 2019, you saw the exact same thing. In 2019, you actually had David Montgomery finishing as the running back 32 in points per game. And here, he averages 15 carries a game, 2.1 targets, and 67 total yards, compared to Tariq Cohen, who averages 4.1 carries a game, but more importantly, 6.5 targets. This is something you're going to be expecting with Cohen. This is something that's always going to happen. You go back to 2018, where Tariq Cohen averaged 5.7 targets. And this is the massive difference that you have between the 2 seasons and between the 2 splits with and without Tariq Cohen for David Montgomery. Now, David Montgomery finished 2020 extremely strong. I mean, he finished as the running back 7 in points per game when Tariq Cohen was not in there. So in weeks 4 through 16. Now, how he did this was he just picked up all that receiving down usage. I mean, he sees a small bump up in carries, which of course, if you lose a running back in the backfield, that should be expected. That goes up to 17 carries a game, which isn't a drastic mark. But no, his targets just skyrocket. I mean, compared to 2019, where he averaged 2.1 targets, he actually gets more than triple the amount of targets per game in 2020 without Tariq Cohen, where he averages 6.41. And we know that targets are going to be worth so much more with fantasy points in PPR leagues compared to carries. So that is what we saw with the boom in David Montgomery. That is why he turned into a league-winning running back at the end of the season. It was not because he's a different running back. It's not because the coaches decided to use him in a different way. It's simply Tariq Cohen not being in the game plan made it where on obvious passing down situations, I mean, are you going to be putting in Ryan Nall, or are you just going to be rolling out David Montgomery? I don't want to make it sound like David Montgomery can't catch passes. Of course he can. He's just not as good as Tariq Cohen, and that's why we've seen the stark difference when Tariq Cohen is healthy versus when Tariq Cohen is out of the game. Now, I mean, this is obvious, but David Montgomery going a couple picks higher than Travis Etienne in ADP. David Montgomery is actually a late 3rd when you have Travis Etienne in the early 4th. I would actually prefer Travis Etienne over David Montgomery straight up. So, of course, we are going to be on record saying that Travis Etienne is the better value in 2021 fantasy drafts. And honestly, it isn't even that close for me. I think if you look historically at what has happened with the profile of a running back that Travis Etienne has coming into the NFL, he is a 3-down guy. He's a very talented running back that can do it all, and that's how he is going to be utilized. And in the case of David Montgomery, historically, what you've seen is when they have a capable 3rd-down pass-catching running back in Tariq Cohen active on the roster, then they are going to be implementing David Montgomery as a running back who, yes, he has the capability to catch passes, but simply they do not decide to use him that way. So what you're going to find is David Montgomery is more a 1st and 2nd down grinder, and I would always rather have the guy that's going to be utilized in the passing game in a PPR format. Now, if you're playing in a standard league, sure, go with David Montgomery over Travis Etienne. But everything we talk about, pretty much every league that you're going to play in 2021 here is PPR, and that's where I'm going to prefer Travis Etienne. Now, thank you guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. I really hope y'all got something from it. Of course, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton, and I will see y'all with the video tomorrow. I really owe a massive thank you for all the Patreon supporters in Ben, Braden, Zach, Ryan, William, Derek, Justin, Marshall, Tyler, and Eamon. Thank you so much, guys.